I'm sure you've all heard, Juliana versus the United States. Myself and 20 other young people, many of whom are right here behind me, are suing Donald Trump and his administration. We are suing because our constitutional rights are being infringed. We are suing not for money, but for a science-based national climate recovery plan. We are suing because none of us and none of you have time to wait. We are not alone. People around the world are standing with us. Support is pouring in. Politicians, scientists, lawyers, parents, teachers, children, and so many others are adding their voices to this movement. Today, not only will you hear from 14 of the 21 plaintiffs, but you will hear also from their lawyers and 4 supportive U.S. senators, as well as 3 amazing partners. Stick around after the speakers. We will be available for interviews until 10:20 and for photos. And be sure to check us out on social media and follow the hashtag YouthVGov. Kicking off today's event is a fellow Oregonian, Senator Jeff Merkley, ranking member of the Green Jobs and the New Economy Subcommittee. Thank you, Senator Merkley.
So right up here we have an incredible set of climate champions. I think 14 of the 21 folks, and let's give them a little bit of applause for being this bold, important voice. No, the case that they have brought, which is that every American citizen should have the right to a climate that sustains human life, not just for this generation, but for generations to come, should be an obvious principle, an obvious right of simply being a citizen on this planet, a person on this planet. But I think it was summed up by Judge Aiken, who said in November, she said, "The right to a climate system capable of sustaining human life is fundamental to a free and ordered society." Amen. That is right on. But what are we seeing right now? We are seeing real damage on the ground everywhere you look, from coast to coast, and for that matter, around the world. Now, in the state of Oregon that I come from, we have, yay Oregon, yay! We have forest fire seasons that are longer and hotter by a matter of about 2 months longer in just over the last few decades. A lot more trees burning. We have irrigation for farms that is drying up because the Cascade Mountains don't have the snowpack that they used to have. We have pine beetles attacking our forests more voraciously because the winter isn't cold enough to kill them off. And we even have oysters having trouble reproducing on the coast. And how would that be possible? And it's because we've burned so much in fossil fuels and created so much carbon dioxide that the ocean is then absorbed through wave action, and it's created carbonic acid. And so it's acidified the ocean. 30% more acidic today than it was 150 years ago before we started burning fossil fuels. And so those little baby oysters are trying to pull molecules out of the seawater to form a shell, and it's so challenging that they die. And if the baby oysters are dying because the ocean's too acidic, what else is happening in the oceans? And all around the world, we see the coral reefs that are dying. The Great Barrier Reef, 80% of it's died over the last 3 years. Or we could turn to the glaciers around the world that are shrinking. We could turn to the Arctic, where the surface ice has become much, much less, and now the open ocean is absorbing a lot more sunlight and becoming even warmer. And so the list goes on and on and on. And we're at a precarious point. We are at a point where the feedback mechanisms are starting to take off on their own. Things like the Arctic ice disappearing and warming the Arctic Ocean. Things like methane that was previously frozen starting to bubble up out of permafrost. And so we have really very little time to act. And that's why this lawsuit is so important, saying that for this generation, our children, and the generations that will come after them, that they have a right to a sustainable environment on this planet. And it takes me back to Henry David Thoreau, who lived a long time ago, philosopher. And back then he said, what use is a home if you don't have a decent planet to put it on? And that's a great question. What good is anything if you don't have a decent planet to put it on? So let's take this case forward. I think it's going to draw so much attention to what is happening. And really, this is a battle that we must win in this generation. Because while we're seeing the effects on the ground right now, we can't afford to wait 20 or 40 or 60 years to address the burning of carbon, the burning of fossil fuels. We have to do it now. So I just applaud all of you for taking this action. I'm so proud of you, so much appreciative of you. And let's go, and together with a court case, with action on the streets, on the ground, the climate march that's coming up. This is a great way to celebrate Earth Day. Let's fight for Mother Earth. Let's fight for our planet, our beautiful blue-green planet, because we don't have an alternative planet. We've only got this one, and so let's save it. Thank you all very much.
What's up, everybody? My name is Shute Scott. I'm 16 years old. I'm from Boulder, Colorado, and I'm incredibly honored to be here today. I think being one of these 21 youth plaintiffs has been an incredible honor over these last couple of years. And I got involved in this movement when I was 6. And back then it was really easy, and still to this day it's really easy to have moments where we feel like we're alone. Where we feel like the weight of this issue, the weight of the crisis that we're facing, the weight of climate change, the weight of the struggle against the Trump administration is too much, and it's easy to feel alone. I think one of the most beautiful things about this lawsuit is it has brought together a community where every single one of these youth plaintiffs has a story to tell. Every single one of these youth plaintiffs has a voice and has a stake in the future that we are determining by our actions in the world today. So to be one of these 21 youth has been an incredible honor for me to be able to carry this story with me on my travels across the country and all over the world. I think the evidence is incredibly clear that we are running out of time really quickly. That the state of the planet is unraveling all around us because of our addiction to fossil fuels. That for the last several decades that we have been neglecting the fact that this is the only planet that we have, and that the main stakeholders in this issue are the younger generation. That not only are the youth going to be inheriting every problem that we see in the world today after our politicians are long gone, but our voices have been neglected from the conversation. We have not been included in the conversations that are so important, where our politicians are no longer representing our voices. When people make decisions to approve fossil fuel permits, to approve pipelines like the Dakota Access Pipeline, like the Keystone XL pipeline, that is a direct attack on the future that our generation is going to be left with, that future generations are going to be left with. And in a situation, in a democracy where our government no longer represents our voices, it is the responsibility of the constituents, of the individuals in this nation, of the public, to stand up and fight and demand that our rights be upheld by those in office. So that is what this lawsuit is about. That is what this movement is about. It is founded on love, and it is founded on justice. Where for us, every decision that we make is a vote for or against our future. Where we fight to defend that which we love. It's about protecting the future of these children, of these youth. For all your children, for every young person in this country, for every person living in this world. That is what we are fighting to defend. That is what we are fighting to protect. That is why we march in the streets, like the Science March, like the People's Climate March, like the Women's March. That's why we chain ourselves to the pipelines in movements like Standing Rock. That's why we resist these projects that threaten our future. This is a movement based and founded upon love and justice, that we are demanding that be upheld for future generations. We do this in our streets, and we do this in our courts. And if you look back through history, some of the greatest changes that have been brought forth in the world and in this nation have come from people. If you look at some of the most powerful decisions that were made by politicians, it was because people pushed them to do so. Where this is the most diverse generation, this is the most progressive generation in history, and when we can all vote, we're going to be the biggest young voting generation that there has been. We are going to elect politicians to represent our voices and our futures. But for now, we are not going to wait until someone in office is representing our voices, because we need the action to come today, because the threat upon our future is happening right now. When we stand in our courts with our stories, with science, and with our legal system behind us, championing for change, where we are here to demand that our constitutional inalienable rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness are upheld. Because for the last several decades to today, they have been infringed upon by our government. Every action that Trump takes to dismantle different laws to protect our environment and protect our climate, every time he rolls back laws to mitigate fossil fuel extraction, that is evidence in our lawsuit that our government is failing to represent us. So we stand united. We stand at a time where the world critically needs a voice that is championing for the voices that are unheard, the marginalized people across the nation that are facing the impacts of climate change immediately, that are seeing the effects of sea level rise, that are seeing the effects of wildfires and floods and droughts impact their communities. Well, we are that voice as the younger generation that is stand in our streets and now in our courts to demand for justice for our generation and every generation to follow. We cannot wait any longer, because this issue is upon us, and this movement is about defending this generation and our rights. So we're incredibly excited to be here today. We're incredibly excited for this weekend. We are incredibly optimistic about our future. We believe in the power of the people. We believe in the power of the younger generation to lead this movement. And when young people are at the forefront demanding that our futures be taken into consideration, when we are fighting and not allowing the bureaucracy of the older generation slow us down, nothing is going to be able to stop us in this journey to create change in this country for every generation to follow, where we are writing the legacy that we know we deserve to pass on to the next generation. Thank you.
Beautiful. Our lives are being impacted, like Shiteska said, right now. Like every kid everywhere, we are facing a future compromised by man-made climate change. So let's meet the plaintiffs who are saying that our lives are being impacted, we're feeling the effects of climate change right now, and we're not okay with it. And our rights are being violated by this government's actions. I'll go first. I'm Kelsey Juliana, I'm 21, and I'm from Eugene, Oregon.
My name is Levi, and I'm from Satellite Beach, Florida. I am 9 years old.
I'm Miko, I'm 15, and I'm from Beaverton, Oregon.
My name is Shiteska. I'm 16 years old, and I'm from Boulder, Colorado.
I'm Journey Zephyr, and I'm a member of the Yankton Sioux tribe, and from Hawaii.
I'm Jacob, I'm 20 years old, and I'm from Roseburg, Oregon.
I'm Zealand, I'm 13 years old, and I'm from Oregon.
I'm Aji Piper, I'm 16 years old, from Seattle, Washington.
I'm Jaden Foylan, I'm 14 years old, and I live in Rain, Louisiana.
My name is Isaac Bergen, I'm 15 years old, I'm from Beaverton, Oregon.
My name is Kieran Newman, I'm 20 years old, and I live in Seattle.
My name is Nick Venner, I'm 15 years old, and I live in Colorado.
My name is Jamie Lynn Butler. I'm 16 and I'm from the Navajo Nation.
My name is Victoria Barrett. I'm 18 and I'm from New York.
We're here today to tell you what the judiciary has to say about our rights, our future, the role of federal courts, from this court on down. On November 10th of last year, Judge Ann Aiken denied the attempts of the U.S. government and the fossil fuel industry to dismiss our case. We're honored to stand here on these steps and read to you some of our favorite passages from this landmark decision.
This is no ordinary lawsuit.
This lawsuit is not about proving that climate change is happening or that human activity is driving it.
This action is of a different order than the typical environmental case. It alleges the defendant's actions and inactions, whether or not they violate any specific statutory duty, have so profoundly damaged our home planet that they threaten plaintiffs' fundamental constitutional rights to life and liberty.
At its heart, this lawsuit asks this court determine whether defendants have violated plaintiffs' constitutional rights.
The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution did not create the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The documents are instead vehicles for protecting and promoting those already existing rights.
And the founding fathers were influenced by intergenerational considerations.
They believed the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and property were rooted in a philosophy of intergenerational equity.
The genius of the Constitution is that it allows future generations to protect the rights of all persons to enjoy liberty as we learn its meaning.
Plaintiffs do not seek to have this court direct any individual agency to issue or enforce any particular regulation.
Rather, they ask the court to declare the United States' current environmental policy infringes their fundamental rights and direct the agencies to implement an enforceable national plan to stabilize the climate system.
Even when a case implicates hotly contested political issues, the judiciary must not shrink from its role as a co-equal branch of government.
Federal courts retain broad authority to fashion practical remedies when confronted with complex and intractable constitutional violations.
Just as marriage is the foundation of a family, a stable climate system is quite literally the foundation of society, without which there would be neither civilization nor progress.
Exercising my reasoned judgment, I have no doubt that the right to a climate system capable of sustaining human life is fundamental to a free and ordered society.
I now have the immense pleasure of welcoming to the microphone a heroine of mine. And this woman has been inspiring me since I was in middle school when I first met her. And she is my deepest example of courage and beauty and strength and fierce determination paired with love. Julia Olson.
Good morning, everyone. I am a mother, and I am a defender of human rights and our Constitution. I'm here to elevate the voices of these young people and all of our children. And as you've just heard, these young people stand with courage to take the Trump administration and the fossil fuel industry to trial this year to protect their rights. But this Saturday, these young people will stand and join with thousands of people across the country and march for climate justice. Just as we know that the people of the United States and citizens of the world will stand with these youth when they head to court later this year. When our trial starts, it will be the moment when climate science will finally get its day in court, where facts are facts and alternative facts are perjury. We are all seeing right now in these tumultuous times the importance of an independent judiciary. Through that judiciary, our rights have been and can be preserved. Our rights to life, to liberty, and to property. But these fundamental rights reserved to the people at the founding of our nation would not matter if we did not have the right to a climate system on which life can flourish. In decisions like Brown versus Board of Education and Obergefell versus Hodges, this court behind us and courts throughout the land have served as the bulwarks to protect our freedoms for our children, our grandchildren, and all future generations. And they must act now with the urgency demanded by the climate crisis we face. For decades of unrestrained fossil fuel pollution and climate change have risen to a constitutional question before our federal courts. And we will not rest, none of us here, and we will not waver. We will be vigilant and stalwart in our pursuit of justice and equality for these youth and for all generations to come. We stand here in determined defense of the United States Constitution and our sacred liberties. And we are honored to have with us today United States senators who recognize how important our Constitution, our climate, and our children are to this country. Thank you so much.
I'm thrilled to say both of my senators are standing here in support of our case. Folks, I'd like to introduce Senator Ron Wyden, also from Oregon.
First rule in the United States Senate is friends do not filibuster friends. So I'm going to be short, and you have had 100% of Oregon's United States Senate delegation. We stand for kids, 100%. And what's important about this morning, particularly with these wonderful buildings that represent our government, is political change doesn't start in these buildings in Washington, D.C. Political change is not trickled down from government buildings to the grassroots. It's bottoms up. As the grassroots start a movement for change. And what's so exciting about this movement is it's being started by kids. A nationwide movement from the grassroots coming from kids. It doesn't get any better than that for American government. Now, here in the Congress, you often hear senators out on the floor of the Congress, and you ask them why they're there, and they say they're doing it for the kids. How many times have you heard elected officials say that? Raise your hand if you've heard them. I've got both of my hands. Well, when it comes to climate change, they'll be doing it now because the kids made them do it. They'll be doing it working for renewable energy and solar and wind and geothermal, all of the renewables, because young people made it clear to their elected officials that young people wouldn't let elected officials stick their heads in the sand, and because all of you are here, elected officials are no longer going to be able to deny the facts. Thank you for making sure that the facts are going to count in the days ahead because of young people. Now, all of you know that you can see the effects of climate change all the time. It's going to be a little warm today. A couple days ago it was really cold. So we're just still trying to sort out all the implications. But in our part of the world, we know that the wildfires are getting hotter and the seasons are getting longer. Droughts are intensifying. The ocean is getting more acidic. And all of this is going to get worse if we don't act to cut carbon pollution. So I'm just going to close with two comments. First, Senator Merkley and I are so proud that our home state and the young people of Oregon are leading this vanguard of protection for our communities, for our health and our safety, and for all of you who are not from Oregon. Could you give a big round of applause for our constituents who are leading this effort? Lead plaintiff. I can't hear you for Oregon. And the last point I'm going to make, as we see this new generation of young people coming to Washington to take on an administration that has patently denied climate science. I want you to know that a lot of people in Washington are still saying, well, let's watch it a little longer, let's study it a bit more. What all of the young people are saying now, because of Oregon and other communities, is not acting on climate change is no longer an option. No longer an option. So I love the signs, guys. It really says it all. And this morning, as we launch right here in front of the court with this effort, I think I mentioned it, the plaintiffs from Oregon. What we're saying is that young people from Oregon to Maine to Hawaii, they're sending a message. This is about their generation. It's about saving the planet. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We will have your back.
I'd like to welcome Kaya. Kaya Chatterjee is the Executive Director of the U.S. Climate Action Network, the largest network of organizations focused on climate change in the United States. Thank you, Kaya.
Thank you. So as we've heard from a lot of speakers, the situation is urgent. I started my career working at NASA looking at a lot of this data, and the conclusion I came to very quickly is that we have a deep moral obligation to those that are hit first and worst, communities of color and low-income communities, and to our children. I have a 6-year-old who I just dropped off at school, so it's so inspirational to hear about kids who started in the movement at 6, like my son. And what I can tell you is that the entire world is full of people, including children, that are relying on us to get the U.S. government to move as the largest historic polluter. We know we have the solutions that we need, and it's the politicians who have failed us. And that's the executive branch. It's the legislative branch, not obviously the senators who are here, who are wonderful advocates, but as a body, they have failed us. Our government has failed our children. And that's partly because they are taking money from the fossil fuel industry, and they're heavily influenced by the fossil fuel industry and corporate polluters who at the end of the day don't care about our kids and our rights to health and a stable climate. But what's interesting is that when industry made their motion, what happened to their motion? It was dismissed, it was denied. So what's amazing is that these kids are headed to the trial of the century, and we need to have their backs. By spreading the word, by tweeting, by Instagramming. I actually downloaded Snapchat. That's how dedicated I am to these kids. And of course, by marching on Saturday. So it's on all of us to stand with these kids because they're standing for all of us and for everything around us if we look around us. And so I'm going to invite you guys to join me with a little call and response here because our kids' future is under attack. So what do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
We can do better than that. Our kids' future is under attack. What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
Let's do it!
Every week, this next senator speaks out on the floor of the Senate, urging Congress to wake up to the threat of climate change. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. It is really wonderful to be here. I have behind me my very favorite Plaintiffs Anywhere. And I guess my message today is that courts are actually a pretty good place to talk about climate change. In theory, courts aren't for sale the way Congress has been to the fossil fuel industry. Unfortunately, since the horrible Citizens United decision from the 5 Republican appointees on the Supreme Court, which was asked for and anticipated by the fossil fuel industry. The fossil fuel industry has had unprecedented artillery to bring to bear over there in Congress, and they have used it to extraordinary effect. When I got to the Senate before Citizens United, there were 4 or 5 different bipartisan climate change bills floating around all the time. After January of 2010, when this group of judges decided Citizens United, there has not been one carbon dioxide regulation bill supported by a single Republican. Because the fossil fuel industry took those new Citizens United guns and pointed them at the Republican Party and said, anybody who crosses us, we will do to you what we did to Bob Inglis, the congressman who they took out for having the temerity to say that climate change was real. So we're still fighting over there, and I believe we will win because the people are with us. But oh my, what a barricade of lies and dark money the fossil fuel industry has built around that place. So that's why this lawsuit is so important. Because when you get to court, facts matter. When you get to court, witnesses must tell the truth or they can be punished. When you get to the court, lawyers even have to tell the truth, at least to the court. When you get to court, spin and industry nonsense can be cross-examined. When you get to court, conflicts of interest can be exposed. Importantly, when you get into court, you get discovery. And as every litigator knows, discovery is a beautiful thing. For the first time, you get behind the front of spin and lies and paid-for calculated misinformation, and you begin to see the other side's actual internal documents. And they've got to come and answer questions under oath before they come into court. So it is not a bad thing that this lawsuit is going forward. It is not a bad thing that attorneys general in New York and Massachusetts are pursuing investigations. It is not a bad thing that the Securities and Exchange Commission and private investors have a cause of action against the fossil fuel industry for lying about the status of their reserves. All of these ways to court will surface the truth from the swamp of lies and calculated misinformation in which this fossil fuel industry traffics, and that it has created this wall of front groups to try to propagate without showing too much the fossil fuel industry's hand. So we have a very important issue. These kids have the right to a life like ours, with a stable climate, with a map that is not shifting as sea level rise moves things around, with fisheries that are not shifting as they have to move around from warming oceans, with firefighting seasons that are traditional firefighting seasons, not a month longer on either side, with the ability to walk through subalpine western pine forests and have them not all be dead because of the pine beetle. These are rights these children have, and it is wonderful that they are pursuing them. And I'm sorry that our friends over here in the legislative branch are so bedeviled by fossil fuel industry money that they can't get the job done, but that means that courts are our other chance. So bless you for what you're doing. It is terrific, and we are pleased to show our support. Thank you very much.
Katie Bedford is the director and co-founder of Extra Rights International, an organization fighting for environmental justice across the globe. Thank you, Katie.
Hi, everybody. I am, first and foremost, a human rights lawyer. And my organization, I'm a human rights lawyer. Thank you. My organization, Earth Rights International, has worked for over 20 years to to hold corporations such as fossil fuel giants like Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil legally accountable for human rights abuses. Human rights abuses including slavery, rape, torture, and crimes against humanity. So over my career, I've had a lot of experience with injustice. And that's why I am so honored and proud to be standing here today with these brave young people, their bold lawyers, and our elected officials who are standing up to injustice, the injustice of climate change. To borrow Judge Aiken's words, this is not an ordinary case, and I am familiar with cases that are not ordinary. My colleagues and I at Earth Rights have represented some of the most marginalized communities on Earth against some of its most powerful corporations, and we've won. So let me say one thing to all of you and everyone who's involved in this critical lawsuit, and maybe especially to the institutions that they're suing. The American system of justice can still be blind to the power of money. And sometimes, just sometimes, and in this case for sure, the good guys win. So this case might not be ordinary, but my goodness, is it necessary. Bishop Desmond Tutu has called climate change the human rights challenge of our time, and we are running out of time. We have our work cut out for us. Present company aside, our government is doing worse than nothing. Our government has been hijacked by corporations, hijacked by fossil fuel companies, hijacked by big oil like Exxon and Chevron. They're pushing us backwards, green-lighting pipelines, rolling back environmental regulations, and of course, this pattern did not begin with Trump. Our government has been under the influence of big oil for as long as I can remember. The American Petroleum Institute, API, you all know them, they've intervened in this lawsuit, and their members and they have been intervening in our democracy for years. For decades, oil, gas, and coal industries have paid hundreds of millions of dollars to intervene in our rights and our futures, and that stops now. That's why these incredible young people have brought this historic case, and all they're asking us to do, all they're asking our government to do, is to do its job, protect their rights, protect their futures, and as Judge Aiken stated, to protect their constitutional right to life and liberty. Is that so much to ask? These most fundamental rights are threatened by our government's failure to protect our public trust, including a stable climate. The government has failed these kids, and instead they've protected the rights of the polluting fossil fuel companies who have a stranglehold on Washington. We need a separation of oil and state. But until that day comes, I believe that our courts, state courts, federal courts, and yes, even the Citizens United Court, the Supreme Court, they are our last great hope for protecting our precious American democracy from an all-out corporate takeover. I stand here with you in front of the Supreme Court as a parent who wants my representatives to care about my kids, my friends, my neighbors. I stand here as a lawyer who respects facts, real facts, not alternative facts and perjury. Science, real science. And I stand here today as an American who believes in the rule of law and the independence of the courts as the key to saving our democracy from corporate control. Like I said, corporations have hijacked our democracy, and these young people are standing here to take it back. They're not only standing for themselves, but for the rights of all the world's children who are threatened and who are already facing the injustice of climate change. They're raising their voices and they're saying enough, demanding that our government provide a science-based solution to climate change, and that our courts protect their human rights, real humans, not corporate, human rights over corporate rights. They're what we call at my organization Earth Rights Defenders. And we thank you. We thank you. Earth Rights International has litigated on behalf of Earth Rights Defenders who have been raped, tortured, and killed while corporations like Chevron, Shell, and Exxon made billions. Comes as no surprise to me that those who would abuse human rights in pursuit of their dirty business would not think twice about trashing our planet. But every one of us should be shocked when our government fails to regulate these companies and protect our public trusts. We should be outraged that they have to go to court to get the government to simply do its job. This case has been called the trial of the century, and it is. Any lawsuit that aims to vindicate the rights of our children, safeguard our Constitution and our planet can be nothing less. It's the first climate lawsuit in the United States to make it this far, but let me say loud and clear, it won't be the last. As a lawyer from an organization that has no problem challenging the biggest, most abusive, most polluting companies in the world, I say one thing: there will be more trials of the century. We know who caused this problem. We know who covered it up. We know who procured bogus science to obscure the truth about their dirty industry. And we know who made billions doing it. Make no mistake. The lies, the cover-ups, the fake science, and the lobbying does not get you a free pass to be above the law. Justice is blind. I still believe that our courts are the last great hope to protect the rights of real people, living, breathing human rights, like all of us. Thank you.
Penny Opal Plant is an author and activist based in Northern California. Thank you and welcome, Penny.
Good morning, relatives. I'm an Indigenous woman from the San Francisco Northeast Bay. What a lot of people don't know about that part of the bay is that there are 5 oil refineries there. And every day when I look out my window on my back deck, I see Chevron and what it's polluting into my community. A lot of people living in the Bay don't realize that there are 5 refineries there. So one of the groups that I co-founded, Idle No More, created a series of healing walks, 1 a month, for a period of 4 years, connecting one refinery community to another. We're led by Indigenous people in prayer, and we have mentored many, many young people. I honor every single one of these heroes standing behind me. They have inspired thousands and thousands, millions of people, young people like themselves around the world. It is so inspiring what they're doing. It is also so important to take our young people into our hearts and to share with them what they know, what we know, and to learn from them. When I think about the fossil fuel industry and what Exxon, Shell, and Chevron knew in the 1970s about climate, it makes me realize and wonder about other species of animals that we share this beautiful planet with, our Mother Earth. I don't know of any species that intentionally and willfully destroys the environment that its progeny needs to simply exist. Our confused relatives in the fossil fuel industry have gone so far away from what it truly means to be a human being, to what it means to think about 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. I think like that. Indigenous people think like that. I invite all of you to think like that and to feel that in your hearts. The Piscataway people from this land, they lived like that. The spirits of those ancestors are still here. They're listening to us. It's time for the natural laws of Mother Earth to be recognized. It's time for the laws of humanity to come into alignment with these natural laws. It is up to every single person alive right now to recognize we have two responsibilities. One is to do everything we can with love in our hearts and non-violently to stop the harms. The other is that we get to imagine our world beyond fossil fuels. And that is also a great responsibility. We encourage people in our communities to do that. Because if we don't begin to imagine what our world can be like without fossil fuels, we're not going to get there. And beyond the energy issue, that we have serious issues in education, serious issues in health, in how our elders are treated, and that lack of continuity of information from one generation to another. So let's imagine all of it together. Let's share that imagining with every one of our communities, because that is an equally powerful responsibility. I'm so honored to have been asked to be here. You are all heroes. You're my heroes, every single one of you. I'm so grateful that you're alive and that you are inspiring so many people, adults and children alike. And we will win this. The great turning is happening. We will win this, and each one of us represents millions of people around the world who are standing with us. Will we win? Yes! I don't think Mother Earth heard you. Will we win? Yes! Thank you.
Senator Markey gets the urgency of climate change. For years, he has pushed for congressional action. Folks, Ed Markey. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for being here. We're so glad to have all these determined young people who are gathered here on the steps of the Supreme Court, along with their lawyers, who are standing up for the planet, standing up for their future, standing up to ensure that we have a green future for this planet. The climate march on Saturday is going to have hundreds of thousands of people who come here to Washington, and all across the country there are going to be climate marches in communities which are going to show in solidarity that there is a commitment to ensuring that we have a future that has a dramatically reduced amount of greenhouse gases that are going up into the atmosphere, and that we are able to protect this planet. And so here's the good news. The green generation standing behind me is going to win. They are going to guarantee that we have a future that is ultimately free of fossil fuels. So, how do I know that? Well, in 2016, we installed 14,000 new megawatts of solar in the United States, 8,000 new megawatts of wind, That's up from almost nothing 10 years ago. And it is only going to continue to grow as each and every year goes by. When I was able to pass the fuel economy standards to dramatically increase the fuel economy standards of the vehicles which we drive in 2007, there was no Tesla. But in 2018, Tesla is going to sell 400,000 all-electric vehicles for $35,000. That is inducing paranoia in Ford, paranoia in General Motors. They know that they have to move as well. And so we are winning, and the next generation has an expectation which is altogether justifiable, that they are going to inherit a planet that is better than the one that was in existence when it was handed to the preceding generation. And so, thank you for everything that you're doing. This is a fight to the finish, but the finish is going to be the technology, that wind, that solar, that all electric vehicles are going to win. That in 2050, children will have to look to the history books to find that there ever was such a battle over whether or not we should use all of God's resources in order to produce the energy on this planet. That is why we are here. This is the time, this is the place, and these are the people who are leading the charge for the next generation. Thank you all so much for everything that you are doing. Thank you.
Climate emergency, Senator. Thank you. Great.
Bill Gregory, our final speaker, is a renowned litigator and co-counsel on our case, and he's just an overall pretty rad dude. Thank you, Phil. Welcome to the stage.
You have just heard why this is the most significant case in America right now. It's national in scope, but also very personal to each one of us. Now, why does this case matter to me? Well, I just became a grandfather, Alice Victoria Gregory. And one of these days, Alice and our youngest Americans are gonna look each of us in the eye, and they're gonna ask, where were you during the climate wars? Were you on the side of preserving our climate and our essential natural resources for our posterity? Or were you on the side of environmental destruction in the name of short-term profits? Yeah. We know what side these kids are on. As Senator Whitehouse said, in our case, we are able to engage in what's called discovery. We can get the documents that have been hidden all along. And what have we found in this case? We have found the damning internal documents that will be the evidence at trial. We have found reports like this 1983 report during the Ronald Reagan administration from the Environmental Protection Agency. Can we delay a greenhouse warming? And the conclusion of this report is that what we're facing in the near term is catastrophic. It's urgent. And we are going to bring these reports, we're going to bring the authors of these reports into the courtroom. And they're going to testify about why the government knowingly chose climate change that will harm America over these children. why the government made a cost-benefit analysis of why the fossil fuel industry is more important than the lives of these kids. We're going to get the evidence in court of why the federal government refused to accept the years and years of data, the numerous reports that said we must do something because climate change is real, it's urgent, and it's catastrophic. Now, I've represented many plaintiffs in my life, but I've never represented anyone that I am as proud of to stand up in court and advocate for as I am for these children. They're courageous. They're like the plaintiffs. Can you hear it? They're like the do we have another one? Oh, excuse me. Okay, these kids are like the plaintiffs in Brown versus Board of Education.
Right. Yeah.
Where they're going to bring the science into the courtroom to show why they are damaged. And they're going to be peer review science affirmers. They're not going to be science deniers. Woo. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
The power may be out, but our determination is not.
Right. So our responsibility is to use our Constitution to protect our future, our children's future, our grandchildren's future. Our founding fathers challenged a regime that was harming their well-being, and their challenge led to our Constitution. Through this lawsuit, these kids are challenging the regime of the Trump administration and the fossil fuel industry. And I want to make sure you're clear. Our case is not just supported by these wonderful senators who were here, or the other speakers, or the various environmental organizations. Religious groups throughout the country are there for us. They're there on the courthouse steps. This is a bipartisan effort. It is not just one group of people advocating in support of the Constitution. So like the founding fathers, these kids are unlikely heroes. They're determined to protect the health and environment of their generation and for generations to come. As Justice Ann Aiken wrote at the beginning of her opinion, and as Levi said when we started reading about her opinion, this is no ordinary lawsuit. I ask you, between now and the end of the year, when we go to trial on this case, to stand with us, to support us. If you have information about what the federal government was doing behind closed doors, information we can't get access to because they've taken down the websites. If you have data that we can use in the courtroom that we can't get to anymore because they're not funding getting the data anymore. If you know people who have the courage to step up like these kids are stepping up and suing our federal government, please come forward and help us. This is not about us. This is about our country. This is about the science and the epic battle between youth versus government. This will be the trial of the century. Our future is at stake. Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much for supporting these kids.
Hello?
Yeah.
I wanna be free, so free, like a flower in the field, like a bird up in the trees, like a dolphin in the sea. I wanna fly high, so high, like an eagle in the sky. And when my time has come, I'm gonna lay down and die. Oh, Pachamama, I'm coming home to a place where I belong. Oh, Pachamama, I'm coming home to a place where I belong. I wanna be free, so free, like a flower and a sea, like a bird up in the sea, like a dolphin in the sea. I wanna fly high, so high, like an eagle in the sky. And when my time is come, I'm gonna lay down and die. Oh, Pachamama, I'm coming home to a place where I belong. Oh, Pachamama, I'm coming home to a place where I belong.
That concludes our speak out. We invite everybody to come on up here. Yeah, you can take a look at it. We'll be here for 15 minutes if you want to interview any of the plaintiffs or the attorneys. We just ask that everybody stay right here in this area. Thank you.